Welcome to Zero to Start Spotlight, a podcast about VR development that brings you inspiring conversations with immersive creators and industry leaders, brought to you by Oculus from Facebook. I'm your host, Siciliana Trevino. Stepping into the spotlight is Frazier, founder and CEO of KaiXR, a 360 VR platform where kids can explore, dream, and create. On this episode of Zero to Start, Kai talks about the intersection of VR, art, and STEM education. Kai shares how VR and education inspired her to change her life, move to the Bay Area, and join the startup world as a solo entrepreneur, building an inclusive and accessible VR platform for kids. All this and more coming up on Zero to Start. Welcome to the podcast, Kai. It's a pleasure to have you as our spotlight guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us about your new VR platform, KaiXR.
KaiXR is a kid-friendly platform where kids can explore, dream, and create. They can explore VR field trips, and they can improve their tech skills by creating their very own VR adventures. And they can watch them on their smartphone, their tablet, their laptop. It goes straight to cardboard mode if you go to the web browser and view it from there.
So it's web VR?
Yes, it is web VR.
That's exciting.
Yes, we worked really hard to have an accessible web VR platform that kids could use on any device they have.
What kinds of field trips do you have on the platform?
We have so many. We just finished filming one with UC Berkeley for CRISPR that talks about DNA editing. Kids can go on astronaut training. They can view the Obama portraits. They can snuggle up to pandas. They can tour Chichen Itza. They have just endless VR field trips that they can go, and we are hoping to add more and more each day. Kids that go on field trips are 95% more likely to graduate from high school. And from being in the classroom, my students will always ask me, where am I in the textbook? So I wanted to make sure I gave kids the opportunity by going on field trips and made it extremely diverse and inclusive, so they were exposed at an early age to new sounds, ideas, careers, thoughts, all of those things, and start to get used to it so they can think critically about the world around them and their role in the world.
You mentioned a field trip to the Obama portraits. Can you talk a little bit about how that came about and the impact that's had on the kids that you work with?
That one was probably my first VR experience that I made, and it was really difficult because it was hard to get into the museum. And on a whim, I sent a DM to Amy Sherald, who painted the portrait of Michelle Obama, and she got right back to me within like an hour or so and said, how can I help? And thanks to her, we were able to get in there, film the portraits of Michelle and Barack Obama, and bring those back to kids all over the place. And those portraits are a big deal because we haven't seen two Blacks who actually painted presidential portraits like that. And for kids to see themselves on the wall on a institution like the Smithsonian Portrait Gallery, it changes their perceptions of what art can be and that they belong in art fields. There are only 4% of Black people that work in art museums. So it was really important to me to make sure I filmed such a stunning example of beautiful Black excellence on the walls of the Smithsonian to show kids at an early age.
How did you first encounter VR? What was your aha moment?
I would say the first time I saw VR, I worked at one of the DC museums, and we had VR experiences running off of a Samsung Gear that gave you a spotlight into the Syrian conflict. And it was great. It worked a lot for the visitors that came through the museum, but I couldn't stop thinking my school that I just finished teaching at, in the previous years was about 30 minutes away, and they couldn't make it to the museums. We couldn't afford to get the kids there. We couldn't afford the buses. We couldn't afford the lunches to give them. So when I saw the VR experiences, it was great that they were in museum experiences, but nobody was really working on bringing the museums out of their location and back to the classrooms, even if it was just 30 minutes away. So my aha moment was, what if I could share these life-changing stories I see every day at the museum and bring them back to my students 30 minutes up the street.
That's exciting that you were able to have the opportunity to question how you could bring these worlds together.
Yeah, I would agree. With the museums I worked at the U.S. Holocaust Museum and the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. So my job was producing stories. So every day I saw really inspiring, life-changing stories from survivors about what they've seen, their hopes, And it was exactly what my students needed to hear, who most of them grew up in really challenging conditions. And it's sometimes the most effective way for kids to really understand their place in the world. So it just bothered me so much that I was seeing these stories every single day and I couldn't get them back to my students.
What was the moment that you were all in and you said, okay, how did you make the transition? I think there's a lot of listeners that are looking to break into VR, whether they're students or further along in their career.
Sure. Well, when I came up with the idea of I was going to start a VR company, I lived in Washington, D.C., and a lot of my friends said I was crazy for even thinking about it. Before that, I had done a little bit of social media management for big companies, even the museums. So they always thought like, oh, you just play on Facebook all day. And they never even saw the back end business strategy for it. So when I went into VR, it was more of the, oh, that's not real. You're going to play on Snapchat? And they thought that's what VR was, mixing of AR. So I got really used to that, but I went to chaperone some kids from the United Negro College Fund in, I want to say October 2017. And I got to shadow them going to different tech companies. Before we kicked off their field trip across the country from DC to Silicon Valley, that was my first time talking to people who worked at tech companies and telling them, I think I want to start a VR company. And I told them my ideas and they all told me that I wasn't thinking big enough. So to be in DC when everybody told me that I was crazy, and then to be in Silicon Valley and they told me that I wasn't thinking big enough, that was my first bit of encouragement that this could be something doable. So when we came back from that field trip, I was sold. I decided to put a plan in motion to sell everything that I owned to make my money for my company. I was really secretive about it. I didn't tell anybody. I told maybe 2 or 3 friends. And then everybody else, I just made my plans to sell everything, get as much money as I could. And I didn't want to hear, a lot of times friends will tell you things out of fear and love. So then maybe they would say are you sure you're doing this? Or this may not be the right time, or do you have enough money? And all those things are really said out of love, but I knew I didn't want to hear any more of them. So I just didn't tell anybody. And then I finally decided to tell everybody maybe a month before. I had a going away happy hour, so I could say all goodbyes at one time. And then I made my plan to move across the country. And when I came here, I had to hit the ground running to learn all I could because I am a non-technical founder. So being in Silicon Valley meant that I could just have a field day trying to learn all I could from the top players in the industry.
That led you to Oculus Launchpad.
Oculus Launchpad happened as maybe a couple months after I got out to the Bay. The biggest thing it did for me, it was the first time I saw a lot of Black VR creators together in one space. I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know it existed. And when I'm in DC all by myself, those aren't conversations or groups that I'm privy to. So when I came out to Oculus Launchpad, that was my first time where I got to see people that look just like me, see their projects, see what they had created. And it was really inspiring to see. So I know for a lot of us, Oculus Launchpad gave us our first tribe to create and have a support system.
You described yourself as a non-technical co-founder. Can you talk about some of the insights that you've had over the course of launching KaiXR and any tips you might have for how to approach being a non-technical co-founder?
So I will say that I could probably write a book of all the things I didn't know and people don't like to talk about as far as starting a company. First, I have to say that I am a solo founder and I get a lot of flack for that. When you're starting a company, they always say, of course it's super hard and you'll do it easier having a co-founder. Well, I didn't have anybody else that was teaching with me and really wanted to take this on. So I took that on myself. So I would say that it's not undoable. You can do it. But if you have somebody that wants to help you, it's probably a little bit better or a lot better for your nerves. I'll put it like that. As far as, just basic things, nobody ever told me I needed to have a Delaware C Corp to take on investments. I functioned my first year as an LLC and didn't realize how much that was going to cause a challenge later on. I didn't know things about being a non-technical founder, what that meant as far as finding tech support. I had a really great CTO that I brought on to start with, but when it came down to making stuff for web VR, that's a really unique sliver of people that can actually do that. So I didn't know how important was to fire fast. So I actually was in the middle of Techstars and had to fire my CTO within the first 3 weeks. And that was really hard to do. I had some great coaching that helped me get through that, but that was tough. So nobody ever told me how common it is to go through a lot of technical people when you're first starting a company, and that's okay. It takes a long time to get somebody and make a good fit. The other thing that I would impose on anybody is to not assign titles when they first start off. When you're starting a new company and you have these new roles, whether it's CFO and CTO and COO, you owe the person an opportunity to grow into that role and decide if that role is even for them. I have people on my team have had to move around here and there. And because you have a title and they have a title in their head so early, it's very hard to have those tough conversations if it's not a good fit. And they almost feel like a failure because they have not been able to grow into that role that you've bestowed upon them. So for my team, we have head of operations, head of sales, things like that, just so they can have the opportunity, because I owe that to the same way it took me a long time to figure out some things as far as running a company. I could talk all day about things I wish I had have known. Hopefully people will start to get more vocal about those things, from forming a company to fundraising.
Tell me a little bit about the community around you and the people that help you get through those times when you're up against the things that you don't know and you have to still move forward to get your product to market.
That's a really good one. Entrepreneurship is not a solo sport by any means. And I have an amazing team of advisors that help me through everything. I can call them at the beginning of the morning and at the middle of the night. And most of my entrepreneur friends, we all talk at night, like in late night hours, because we're always up all day. So I'm really appreciative for that team. Okay, funny story. Don't laugh at me. We were fundraising and we've gone through all this work on getting the term sheet, getting the people, closing the deals. And then me and my head of finance looked at each other and we were like, how do we get the money? Nobody ever told us how we actually get the money. That was like such a basic thing. One of my main advisor, Wallen, he was like, okay, no issues. You make a PDF, you have your wire information on it, and that's how you actually give them the information to make the transfer. That was such a basic thing, but we were mortified that we did all that work and didn't know like that tiny step. Even fundraising, people would tell you like the ins and outs. Nobody tells you how to start. So I think I've had a lot of false starts fundraising because I just didn't know what it really entailed. So even for tech questions, when we were in our tech build, there's some things that maybe I'm not understanding too well. I have some great advisors on the Mozilla side that help me ask any technical question. Once again, my main advisor, Wallen, can help me with tech, from fundraising to just confidence. One of the hardest things as being a founder of color is that we're not usually used to making ask. Somebody has to teach a class to underrepresented founders in making an ask. So little things, when you live your whole life being used to asking for help and it always falling on deaf ears, you really quickly start to internalize that asking is going to do nothing but slow you down. But a lot of these things, you have to ask for help. And even asking for money is extremely hard for me. So I can push a GoFundMe around all day, but when it comes down to like committing like 100,000, whoa, that's a whole nother conversation. And it takes a different type of confidence to even make that ask. So there are a lot of smaller things that people don't talk about and aren't as sexy to talk about on social media timelines that are really big issues. And the piece of advice that I give to entrepreneurs, especially Black ones, is I tell them that to do this journey, it is going to hit on every part of your soul. Even the things you thought were off limits, from childhood trauma to insecurities, are going to come up in this journey. So you have to make time to really be at peace with those things and to get to the bottom of them so you can move forward. So for me, for example, I was homeless when I was in high school, so I always have this burden complex. I never want to burden somebody or ask them for something or be a charity case. And that really is a disadvantage for me when fundraising, because I never want to ask for money. Even friends who want to invest, I will discourage them from investing just because I have such a mental block around somebody giving me money to help me. So these are just so many things that I'm thankful for my advisors, mentors, and even friends that really sit me down and tell me like, no, you deserve the money, you need the money. Mandela from Founder Gym is one of the ones who told me, like, you have a lot of tools in your toolbox. Money is going to be one of the tools you need to build your company. So you're trying to do all these things and you're lacking a big tool. So right now you have to like dig deep and know that you're going to have to ask for money. So like I said, I'm just super thankful for all of the people and the community around me that have helped me with every step of this journey.
Your life experiences that brought you to this point have to carry you through the fire of starting your own company.
Yeah.
And it's a real evolution of your true north in terms of your purpose. And it's exciting to see how VR and education have really come together for you in a way that you were able to catalyze that and transform yourself into an independent business entrepreneur.
You know, every day I ask myself, like, what in the world are you doing, Kai? Because for me, VR has always been a tool. This is one tool that really helps my students learn very fast and the lessons stick with them. So VR wasn't something I was really stoked about. It was just, I could see the connection it was making for kids. One of the most effective ways I'd seen in a long time, even for my kids with maybe behavioral or emotional issues. When they saw a VR headset, they were behaving in brand new ways because they were patiently waiting for their turn to even hold the headset. So for me, it was like, what is this tool that's basically transforming my classroom or transforming the kids that I work with? And that's the only reason why I decided to take this challenging venture of VR. As a teacher, you are with your students and you see them out to the finish line. So whatever you can do to give them an advantage so they can be successful and be whole as a student, you do.
Can you talk a little bit about that impact? Can you talk about some of the reactions that you've had with your students?
It's always fun to see kids get their first VR experience for the first time. I will say some of the things that aren't usually talked about as much is I have kids that really want to do VR experiences, but they get frustrated because they can't put it over their hair. Kids who may have disabilities, they can't turn around and move the headset and things like that. So sometimes we go into those issues as well. So what's been even more fun is having to adapt VR to work for all students and see like a wide range of kids enjoying it. As a teacher, when you have kids who maybe can't participate, you have a huge divide in your classroom, the kids who are not included and the kids that get to do all the fun, cool new things. So VR has been fun just to kind of make tweaks to it so all kids can join in and learn. Kids do everything from getting super excited to, their faces change and light up. Sometimes they get really silly and want to walk into a wall just to get on my nerves. And then one of the coolest thing of kids is they like to share. So as soon as they watch something, the first thing they do is turn to their friends, say like, you watch too. And it's cute because they're trying to both put their heads into a headset sometimes. They can't figure out why they can't do it. It's their instinct to share them. And they don't understand why they can't easily share the headset. And if you're strapped in it, it's really hard to kind of get strapped out because their initial reaction is to turn to the kid and share immediately. So one of the things that I hope for VR education and maybe VR as a whole to focus more on is it's really important how we preface the VR experience and what happens at the very end. So a lot of kids, their reaction depends on how we're preparing them. We always need to have them thinking critically before they go into the VR experience. Like we just filmed the VR experience for CRISPR at UC Berkeley, and we started off by saying, if you could change the DNA in any living thing, would you do it? Why or why not? And that really gets kids thinking first about like, why would I change the DNA? Can DNA be changed? And then they're open to really understand what's happening in the VR experience. I see a lot of, I don't want to say traumatic, but more like emotional empathy pulling out of you VR experiences sometimes. And without the kids having a moment to process it, sometimes they have adverse reactions that I'm sure the creator didn't anticipate having. For example, I put kids into a Syrian VR exhibition when I worked at the Holocaust Museum, and it wasn't very war targeted. It was more on Syrians having their hopes and dreams like squashed, and they still have those aspirations even in a civil war. Once we gave those to kids, they came out just really sad and wanting to cry. And we had to kind of like help them through processing what they had seen and what was the hope and things like that. So always my fear sometimes is like giving kids VR experiences and not putting the time and effort to preface them with some great information and then to help them process at the very end. It's not just the headset and the VR experience. When we get into STEM activities, sometimes building the cardboard is fun for kids. They want to know how it's built, how everything goes together, things like that. They want to know about how to make the VR experience. So some of my youngest kids, we talk about what does it mean to have 360 degrees, drawing a circle, what is 180? So they need those beforehand to even process that there's stuff behind you. And what does that mean? We even tie that into math sometimes, geometry. So there's so many different things we tied into to build off the knowledge they already know so they can get the most in the intentions that were probably set when that VR experience was created.
You brought up cardboard, and it's a little bit contentious sometimes on conversations and on threads about, does a cardboard experience harm or advance the cause of VR? Cardboard was one of the first things I was able to learn how to build with and show other kids how to build with. It's really accessible. And to me, that's what makes it the most innovative headset. Do you have a lot to say on this issue?
Do I? What's going to make the Twitter trolls mad today? So cardboard took us off the sidelines. And I know people get so upset talking about cardboard, but I feel like you have to separate the technical advances and like the community advances. And people don't have an ability to see both sides of things. And it's really frustrating, especially because these are the main people that are in charge of building tech for the rest of the world. So for cardboard, for example, I don't know, like we say VR is for 13 and under, please don't put kids in the VR headset if they're under 13. Okay, great. Knowing that there are a lot of kids that use VR before they turn 13, right? So if a kid is using a headset at like 8 or 9, I cringe sometimes when I see like bigger, like an Oculus Quest or like a little young kid like that. For a lot of them, like they need some like stepping stones before they even get to that point. And the cardboard is lightweight for them. They have so much fun like decorating it and building it. And I mean, it builds a lot of overlooked STEM skills that we use in the classroom. So for me, cardboard, that was my first real touch point to working with VR. It was a Samsung Gear and it was cardboard headsets. So I know people hate them, I get it. But for me, I cringe every time I see cardboard support being dropped, especially in this tech build that we were doing. Part of the reason why it's been so challenging is I wanted to make sure that we decided to build on WebXR because we wanted to make it accessible. With that, we don't have a lot of cardboard support, especially not for iOS. So that's been a huge issue. When I work with kids, it's like half the room gets sad that they can't use their cardboard headset because they have an iPhone. The other half is really excited and they are just like smitten for days just going through all the experiences. So I wish that there was a bigger emphasis on the VR community as a whole to innovate for different experiences, different price points, and really understanding how a lot of these great VR ideas will never be born if it wasn't for that first accessible touch point that sparked the kid's brain to stick with it, to get on the level to actually start building some VR things we would have never seen. People ask me all the time, like, what's the future for VR and what do I hope for it? I don't really think there's a future until more people and more diverse people jump in and they can start having their ideas and their unique ideas play out on VR development. But for a lot of them out cardboard, they never get that touch point. And then, for a lot of us, we work in VR, so we can easily get through the setup when you get a new Quest out the box. I go in schools and I try to give teachers and librarians like, hey, here it is, let's set it up. It's like a non-starter. Kids don't know what calibration is most times. It takes them a while. They have to get a little bit older before they even understand what's happening in that headset when they first put it on. So when you take it off from one kid to another, it has to be reset. And that's almost a non-starter sometimes. So there's all these little things that are second nature to us. If you can just walk outside of your shoes and think about somebody who has never seen this equipment, it's very challenging for them. And cardboard is just throw it in, you're ready to go. It's really important. People overlook that strap. We take the strap out of all of our headsets because kids can hold it. They don't feel as scared to be strapped in. And then if you've ever seen a kid and you put them on a VR experience, they start wailing their hands out, doing some weird stuff with their hand holding the cardboard. That doesn't happen. So they're safer. So we, prioritize taking that strap off.
Anyone who is interested in getting into VR, it seems like making a small project that you can show people and see their reactions is going to give you the most information around what you like about the process and how important the work is, not just when you finish making something, but when your audience encounters it.
Yeah, I wish everybody who is making VR will put the experience on a kid and on their grandparents, and you'll never design the same. So when by default, by working with kids, and then I transitioned to working to the Holocaust Museum and the African American Museum in DC, I had to work with a lot of seniors. So like, what is it like putting a headset on a Holocaust survivor? And they will give you so much feedback. And it's really helpful to know that. It's not that they don't want to do it or they can't do it. They love some of the VR experiences, but they look at it completely different. They look at a computer completely different. So when you start to have that in mind, you have a new level of empathy. So, and I think a lot of people that are creating the tech, they never get to put it on people and see that experience.
You've been a part of a lot of high-profile accelerator programs. What are leading indicators for succeeding in these programs, and what's helped you survive in a highly competitive and volatile industry like VR?
You know, when you asked that question, I was laughing to myself, like, wow, I think you have been in some like top notch like opportunities. And that's crazy because when I started this, I would have never imagined any of that. And it's so rare that you sit back and think about it. But yeah, anyway, to your question.
Yeah, you have that moment of standing outside of yourself and said, oh, I did that.
Well, yeah, like I did. Wow. I think that does count as like, you know, these are opportunities I prayed for. You know, I tell people all the time, like, I gave up everything I had to do this. I have to remind people sometimes, like, hey, I wasn't always poor. Okay. Like I used to have a really good job and a really high profile job in DC. And I loved my position and I gave all that up to help kids. So when it comes down to these accelerators and all these things, I don't play any games. I run a very tight ship. It's really important to me that everybody's on the same page. So when things get rocky, they know what I expect out of them. Somebody recently called me an undercover overachiever, and I had never made that connection before. And I was like, you know, you might be onto something. I just don't take any of these opportunities lightly. I know how many people that look like me are like sitting on the sidelines hoping for a chance. So, you know, not only do we take this chance, we make sure we help others who want the same opportunity.
How has COVID impacted your work? It seems more important and critical now because you have this content that is shared over the web and people can take these virtual field trips.
I've always ran my platform and my mission on inclusivity and accessibility. There's been no change to that. But as far as ed tech is probably the least sexy sector you can be in for a startup. People don't want to touch it, they don't want to invest in it, and it's just not important to them. It's the same with accessibility. It's not what people put a lot of their money into. So when COVID happened overnight, it was like, oh, everybody's looking for access because we lost access overnight. Education, we don't even know what education means right now. So as we go into what the future of education will be and will it be accessible, we didn't need COVID to tell us that there were this many kids who didn't have laptops at home or didn't have Wi-Fi at home. So we get into the whole issue of digital truancy. And our kids are being marked down or they're falling behind in school because they can't connect to things. That's just a regular academic reading and writing type of thing. When you get into tech and STEAM related skills and things like that, they don't have the tech at home. They were lucky to have it at school if their school could afford the tech. So right now, it's a big emphasis on getting the tech to the kids at home. Even for a lot of the tech that they share in the school, people are very adverse to using these standalone headsets if they're sharing them because of germs. So cardboard now is in. We were shocked to see that. We had a children's hospital we were talking to, and they had a whole program built around the Oculus Quest. And then when COVID happened, they couldn't share the Quest between kids anymore. So they didn't know what to do. So we're seeing a lot of opportunities for us, but it shouldn't have had to take COVID to exacerbate these huge issues in the digital divide. And that's what I'm hoping for all of this. I hope that a lot of new people come to the front lines to innovate for the least of us, for different populations. I think a lot of times we have this big emphasis on it being, it has to be a unicorn company, you know, $1 billion return. We're going to need some smaller companies too that can, you know, really fill the gap in a lot of communities who don't have much and they're still expected to perform on the same level. And if we don't, we're going to have huge societal issues. Before COVID, I think I'm going to probably get my stat messed up. It said something like by 2024, there is going to be a 50% shortage in computer tech graduates, and most new jobs created since 2010 require medium to high level tech skills. So what does that mean when people can't get these jobs? You have a huge societal gap. And I don't think people are prepared for that.
It's interesting to be at the forefront of trying to solve those problems and how technology is at the same time the means and the obstacle. One of the things about Zero to Start was a way for me to reflect on the past 4 years of my experience in the immersive space. Every day there's announcements of new platforms, new frameworks, the discontinuation of things, the things that we worked with yesterday, like Gear VR and the Go. You have to be adept and agile, right? To switch from platform to platform after you've spent months perfecting one platform and it just goes away. For you, it sounds like being prepared, making sure your team is prepared every day is part of success.
Yeah, I have one advisor that always tells me in the end, the web always wins. And the best way to be prepared is to build for the web. As systems go down, as things are discontinued, we need to make sure that our offerings are accessible to all devices. So we make sure we're device agnostic. And that's why we made the decision, thanks to my advisor Wallen, to build for the web. I know that's not attractive to a lot of people, but the accessibility is what we are building for at our core. A lot of these devices and platforms, they're rented spaces. So, you know, how can you make a long-term move that will prepare you if something goes down, there's a boom and a bust, which we've seen time and time again.
And I think to your point, if you're building with a core value in mind, that can help inform the decisions going forward.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more. Like, it's just always planning for the worst that could happen. My plan A has never worked most of my life. So I'm really good at thinking through like a plan, at least a plan F for everything. And that's where a lot of the overthinking comes. And I think that has prepared me a lot getting into tech. Some of these things that we put a lot of our eggs in one basket, it's not coming out the way we expected.
What tools are you using to work remotely with your team? Are you meeting in VR? How are you managing the launch in the time of COVID?
Sure. So for my team, we use as many remote tools as we can. So I know my personal favorite is not VR related, but we use the Front app for shared inboxes. And that's really easy for us to communicate just via email and make sure we can tag each other in. Things don't get lost in CCs and blind copies and things like that. I'm learning to use Discord. I was really proud of myself being in Discord. So that has helped tremendously. Surprisingly, we don't use Slack. We use Discord for everything. When we are looking for immersive opportunities or immersive spaces to collaborate, our first choice is always Hubs by Mozilla. And that's great because it's easy to get people, you know, jumped in really quickly and it's just intuitive. So for my team, it has been extremely helpful whether we are meeting together or running a virtual summer camp. That's been our tool of choice.
You're conducting virtual summer camp on Mozilla
Yeah,
Hubs?
we'll do some, so we do collaborative work with kids sometimes. So we'll have them creating in rooms together. For some of the younger kids, we maybe put them all in the same room and they built a room together. They were all solving a societal issue. So the issue we gave the kids in a COVID world or a post-COVID world, how do we adjust for school, social activities, and transportation? So a lot of the girls took on the challenge of like, what do social activities look like and how can VR be a solution for social activities in COVID? So they may have made a maze on hubs, hid things all throughout the maze, and they all designed their own kind of puzzle and they had fun doing that. We had some that made like dream houses so they could to collaborate. Some took games they played in real life and put them on hubs. What they made was 10 times better than what I could have ever made in hubs. So it was cool just watching kids use the tools and go from there for collaboration.
And what's great about hubs is that it's device agnostic as well, right? So it's based over the web, people that can have a 2D experience on their mobile devices or on their desktop, or they could be fully immersed in a VR experience.
Yeah, and I usually do hubs on my laptop. And that's my method of choice. But definitely we go to a headset sometimes. For a lot of even my team, we would do these things that when we were trying to get better at using hubs and Spoke, we would have Friday design jams. We would each try to make the best room in Mozilla Spoke and try to outdo each other. And then we would go into each other's rooms on an Oculus Go. And man, I'm just going to say my team was beating my butt every single Friday. And I finally won one Friday. And that's when I canceled the competition. We haven't done it since. I was so happy to win. And like we can just stop right here. So yeah, a lot of that we do both. We build on our laptop. We go into the rooms on our Oculus Go or Oculus Quest.
That sounds like fun. The primary time that I've used Mozilla Hubs is on mobile to show people how easy it is to use on mobile.
And the kids think it's a video game. They love it. They're like, oh, this is like Fortnite. This is like Minecraft. And they just get so into it.
What do you tell kids who are curious to learn more or already excited about learning how to build their own experiences? How do you help direct them to find the resources they need to get started?
For my platform that we're building right now, we have called the platform, we tell kids they can explore, dream, and create. So we let them explore VR field trips, and then we have them dream up their own fun stuff, like in a Hubs-like version. And then we put them in a Spoke-like version so they can actually create from scratch. So we always, from the first touch point, tell kids like it's more than just being consumers of content. We need you to dream up stuff and then create it. So I make sure that I always have that lens on for kids, and then just encourage them to jump all in and dream really big and sketch out a lot of solutions. For our summer camps, we actually had the kids sketching out their solutions first. And that's how their rooms got to be so amazing. They had a whole blueprint before they even started. And then I also challenge kids to tell them, like, if you see content that's not here in our VR experiences, then we need you to make it. And I tell them from the very beginning, like, we are waiting for you all to create the future of VR experiences. And we ask them what they want to make, stuff that exists in real life and stuff that doesn't exist in real life. And they come up with some really amazing ideas. Instead of telling kids what to do, just asking them what they want to do. And they amaze me every single day.
What kind of music helps keep you focused and in the zone? Is there anything in particular that's on your playlist that we should be listening to?
Oh my God, I'm such a music head. I could talk music all day. The saddest thing about COVID to me is that I can no longer go to concerts. And that was like my relief from start of life. I would go to a concert by myself sometimes and just have a blast. So I'll tell you that all of last year, my two startup albums were Lucky Days Painted and Anderson .Paak's Ventura were my two go-to. Right now, I've been just going through my Frank Ocean Pandora channel, and it has been amazing. And so anything I can find, even chill, relaxing playlist, if it's like from FKJ or anybody, just something that for me, because a lot of my work is thinking out stuff. Like right now I'm storyboarding something. I can't listen to a lot of lyrics or new music. So I have to go to stuff that I already know the lyrics, and it can be soft background music. So I have a team of amazing DJ people. So they have the best playlist, and we share playlists back and forth to keep working.
Private playlists from your DJ
friends.
Yes,
luckily my team are all my DJ friends, so they send us some really good tracks. Before I even got into VR, I used to dabble in entertainment, doing production, social media, videography for concerts and everything. So I am an extreme music head. I could debate music all day for some people. I cannot do any work without music in the background. It also helps me time things. I'm struggling a bit now because like new music is so short, but I used to know 3 songs, about 12 minutes. So that really kept me like internally on time with things that I was doing as well.
Nice. I like that as a timekeeper. Tell me about the GoFundMe campaign that you've launched. You've raised 6 figures so far. What has that been like, and how can we help support it?
We are doing our pre-seed raise right now. It's our first time fundraising money. So we've gotten a good amount of angel investors, some VC investments, and then all the small investments. They're so monumental to us continue our work. So for the GoFundMe, we brought in a couple thousand and it's been phenomenal. So I've been shocked. A lot of people in the VR space have donated, which was like really surprising to me. A lot of great tech people. And then I even had some of my students donate. Whether they donate like $20 or some donate $50, that's really has been blowing my mind to have taught them when they were like 11 and now they're 20 and they're donating to our work. So that's been really beautiful too. So I tell people, if you have any extra coins you want to give us, please send coins. You can find our GoFundMe, and those contributions help as well. If you're interested in being an angel investor, I'm so obsessed with having a diverse cap table and having a lot of new investors, and especially Black investors, as we start to really look at what it means to build generational wealth. You know, when you're angel investing, the cap is so high to get started. We've really made some exceptions to get some new investors on, and I'm really looking forward to what that looks like. One of the things that Mandela always taught us with Founder Gym is we decide who we make rich. So I've been really picky in particular about who I reach out to, who's coming on. Even some people have offered, but it's like I want to make sure that we are getting mission aligned people. So we have a great platform that continues to keep kids first and their data and their privacy protected. And then we're continuing to work on accessibility and inclusivity.
Is there anything you'd like to add about getting into VR development or starting your own VR company? Are there any trends or news that you're excited about right now?
When people want to start a company, whether it's VR or anything, I always remind them that the key is to start where they are, start with what they know, and start with what they have. For me, when I got into VR, I had nothing more than a cardboard headset. And if I was going to wait until I could afford maybe an Oculus Rift or something, I probably would have never started. So I tell people, even like photography, they always say the best camera is the one that you use. So no matter what happens, as long as you're getting out there and trying, you're doing so much more than most people. And I remind them that it's going to be scary probably all the time. Half the days I'm doing work, I don't even know. I'm questioning myself, like, why are you still doing this to yourself? But once you get used to working in that fear and accepting that it's going to be scary, it turns into bravery. People ask me, like, how are you never afraid? I'm like, I'm terrified. But I know to be brave and to walk through the fear. So I remind people of that all the time, that there's never going to be a perfect moment. You're never going to have the right amount of money you think you're going to have, but you have to start. And as far as VR trends, I'm always excited for what the kids create. I feel like my only job in this is to give them the tools and the stepping stones they need and then get out their way. So I am really excited to see what's going to be the future of VR. I'm not worried at all. I know that the kids, they're doing a fantastic job, and I am just ready to try all their new VR experiences.
Well, that's definitely a vision for the future that we can all help manifest. Thank you so much, Kai, for joining us today and sharing your incredible story of breaking into VR. And congratulations on the launch of KaiXR, and wish you all the best success to come.
Thank you so much.
Explore, dream, and create at KaiXR.com, and follow them on Twitter at ExploreKaiXR. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the resources that we covered in today's episode and Kai's quarantine playlist. Thanks for joining us today on the Zero to Start Spotlight, brought to you by Oculus from Facebook. You can support Zero to Start by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Give us a rating and share this episode with people who want to learn more about breaking into VR. Until next time, happy installing.